It's been pretty hard to miss all the noise online since that India-Pakistan ceasefire was announced.
Oh, definitely.
Social media just exploded with some really intense claims, stuff about potential strikes on a Pakistani nuclear facility.
Right. And then that layer about a U.S. nuclear safety plane showing up.
Exactly. It just created this real sense of, well, uncertainty. Given the tension's already there, it certainly got people talking.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting, especially for anyone following the region closely, is seeing how fast these stories can spread, particularly against the backdrop of that, very recent and probably fragile ceasefire. It just highlights how complex things are.
Yeah, and how quickly things can get amplified. Plus, you had the official Indian press briefing, was it May 12th?
That's the one.
Where they did confirm strikes on several Pakistani air bases. So you've got this official military action reported.
Running alongside these much more sensitive and, frankly, unverified claims about nuclear sites.
Which brings us to the challenge, doesn't it? How do we sort through all of this? What actually happened? What's just speculation?
That's the core question, trying to separate fact from fiction, or at least plausible claim from pure guesswork.
So that's exactly what we're aiming for in this deep dive. We want to unpack these claims, the alleged strike near Kirana Hills, this mysterious US B-350 aircraft.
And try to understand the potential implications based on what's been reported.
Right. We want to help you get a clearer perspective on the situation, the different accounts, and importantly, the unanswered questions.
And just to be clear, our main source for piecing this together today is a report from the Eurasian Times. They've done a pretty thorough job collating these different threads.
Okay, so let's start with the official side first. What did India actually say about their airstrikes?
So according to that Eurasian Times report, the Indian Air Force confirmed at the May 12th briefing that they hit several Pakistani air bases.
Which ones?
The list included Rafiki, Nurkan, Murid, Rahim Yar Khan, Sukkur, and Chunian. And they also mentioned hitting radar sites, specifically at Pasrur and Sialkot.
Okay, that's quite a few locations.
It is. And the Eurasian Times also points to satellite imagery that reportedly suggested another strike. This one on Mullar Cantonment in Karachi.
Karachi, too. Wow. So if you look at the map, Islamabad, Rawalpindi, Lahore, Sialkot, Sargodha, Karachi, they're spread out across major cities.
Yeah, it paints a picture of a pretty geographically widespread operation. Definitely suggests the intensity of things just before the ceasefire kicked in.
Okay, so that's the confirmed, or at least officially stated part. Now, the really explosive claim, the alleged strike on a nuclear storage facility, Kirana Hills, where did that come from?
Well, the Eurasian Times suggests this really took off based on satellite imagery, images that supposedly show damage at the Mushaf Air Base in Sargodha.
Okay, Mushaf Air Base, and the connection is?
The connection, or the speculation, is that Mushaf Air Base is believed by some analysts to be linked to underground nuclear storage sites thought to be located beneath the Kirana Hills nearby.
Ah, okay. So damage at the airbase led people to infer a possible hit on a related nuclear site. That's a big leap, but I see the logic trail.
It's definitely circumstantial at that stage, but then this speculation got a huge boost from those reports about the U.S. aircraft.
Right, the B-350 AMS, that really poured fuel on the fire, didn't it?
Yeah.
The Eurasian Times mentioned Flight Radar 24 data.
Yes, data allegedly showing this specific aircraft. It's operated by the U.S. Department of Energy for Nuclear Emergency Support landing in Pakistan.
For anyone listening who isn't familiar, what does this kind of plane actually do, B-350 AMS?
So AMS stands for Aerial Measuring System. It's basically a flying lab for detecting and analyzing radiation. Think nuclear emergency response.
Right.
Its job is to sniff out radioactive materials, map contamination on the ground or in the air, check out nuclear facilities if needed, and basically assess the danger in a nuclear incident scenario like fallout.
Got it. So seeing that specific plane reportedly show up right when there are rumors about a strike near a nuclear site, well, it naturally made people think radioactive leak or some kind of nuclear safety emergency.
Precisely. And as the Eurasian Times points out, this really spun up the narrative, especially online in, say, Indian social media circles and among defense watchers.
That was the narrative.
The suggestion, or speculation, was that maybe Pakistan had been hit near a nuclear site, got worried about more strikes on their nuclear infrastructure, and perhaps reached out to the U.S. for help securing the ceasefire.
And this wasn't just random online chat.
No, the report mentions that some foreign media outlets also picked up on Pakistan's supposed concerns about its nuclear command structures potentially being targeted.
Okay.
And there's a pretty telling quote included in the Eurasian Times piece attributed to a former U.S. official in the New York Times.
What did it say?
This official mentioned Pakistan's, quote, deepest fear is having its nuclear command authority decapitated. And they interpreted the earlier confirmed strike on Norcon Air Base possibly as India sending a signal related to that vulnerability.
Wow. Okay, so that adds a layer of documented anxiety about their nuclear command, even before these specific Kirana Hills claims surfaced. It paints a very tense picture.
Definitely complex, but then you have India's very clear public denial.
Right. Air Marshal Party, at that same May 12th briefing, what exactly did he say?
The Eurasian Times quotes him categorically denying any strike on any nuclear facility. He was apparently asked directly about Kirana Hills and responded, somewhat sarcastically, that he had no knowledge of any nuclear facility there.
That's about as direct a denial as you can get from a top official. Still, that leaves the mystery of the U.S. plane. Did it actually fly there?
Well, that's the thing. It remains murky. The Eurasian Times is careful to state that the alleged flight hasn't been independently verified. And this is where OSINT bloggers, people using open source intelligence, jumped in with a counter theory.
What did they propose?
They suggested the plane tracked might not have been the U.S. Department of Energy 1. Instead, it could have been a similar aircraft type, a B-350 variant, that was reportedly handed over to the Pakistan Army Aviation years ago, back in 2010.
Oh, interesting. So Pakistan operates a similar plane?
Yes, the Eurasian Times confirms Pakistan does use a variant of the B-350. So the OSINT suggestion is basically mistaken identity tracking data picked up a Pakistani plane, but it got flagged or interpreted as the U.S. nuclear emergency one.
That highlights the pitfalls of relying solely on publicly available tracking data. It can be misinterpreted.
It certainly can. And the source itself, Eurasian Times, is explicit. They couldn't independently verify the landing or why the plane, whichever one it was, might have been there. Need multiple reliable sources.
Absolutely. But despite India's denial and these doubts about the plane, the online speculation didn't really die down, did it?
Not at all. The Eurasian Times notes that many netizens kept speculating. The gist being, maybe India did hit something sensitive but wouldn't admit it publicly because, well, attacking nuclear facilities carries huge international condemnation.
That fear of global backlash. Makes sense.
Yeah, and the report even mentions, kind of amusingly, that the whole alleged Kirana Hills strike became fodder for memes on social media.
Right. A serious geopolitical incident potentially gets turned into memes. Welcome to the 21st century.
It really shows that dynamic, doesn't it? Serious allegations floating around, impacting perceptions, alongside this very informal, sometimes wild online discourse.
Let's dig just a bit more into that aircraft, the B-350 AMS. You said it's run by the Department of Energy and NNSA.
That's right. National Nuclear Security Administration. Primarily for that aerial measuring system program, focusing on nuclear safety. But as the Eurasian Times details, it's more than just a Geiger counter with wings. It provides real-time data during incidents. It can do detailed surveys of nuclear sites, assess environmental impacts, basically give a very comprehensive picture in a nuclear-related event.
So not just is there radiation, but how much, where, what's the risk?
Exactly. And the U.S. actually unveiled 3 new upgraded versions, King Air 350ER models, back in December 2019, which shows they're still investing heavily in this capability.
Okay. But you also mentioned it's versatile, not just for nuclear stuff.
Oh, yeah, very versatile. The King Air B350ER platform is a real workhorse. It gets used for all sorts of special missions, often in tough environments.
Like what?
Intelligence gathering, surveillance, reconnaissance, ISR, transporting special forces, maritime patrol, even anti-submarine warfare in some configurations, and air ambulance duties, too.
Wow, that's a wide range. ISR, special ops, maritime, medevac. No wonder several countries use it.
Exactly. The Eurasian Times mentions the U.S., Afghanistan, Pakistan itself, Canada. It's known for being adaptable and rugged.
And technically, what are its specs, roughly?
Pretty capable. Range is decent, almost 1,900 nautical miles. Twin Pratt & Whitney turboprop engines, good fuel capacity, sometimes modified for even longer range.
So you can stay airborne for a while and cover a lot of ground.
For sure. Modern cockpit, too. Collins Aerospace Avionics, GPS, weather radar, can often be flown by just one pilot if needed. Size-wise, think mid-size turboprop, about 14 meters long, wingspan nearly 18 meters, can carry a decent payload.
And you mentioned reconfigurable cabin earlier.
Yeah, that's key to its versatility. You can swap out the interior setup depending on the mission passengers, cargo, medical equipment, or the specialized sensor suites for things like the AMS role.
Okay, let's try and wrap our heads around all this. We had the confirmed Indian strikes on multiple air bases. Then, these unverified claims mostly via social media and satellite interpretation, of a hit near a nuclear site at Kirana Hills.
Linked possibly to damage seen at Mushaf Air Base.
Then the reports of this U.S. nuclear safety plane, the B-350 AMS, allegedly landing in Pakistan, which fueled speculation about a leak or safety issue.
Followed by reports of Pakistani concerns over its nuclear command, and then India's strong denial of hitting any nuclear site.
And the U.S. plane's flight remains unconfirmed, with a plausible counter-theory that it might have been a Pakistani B-350 variant.
Right. And lots of online chatter, speculation, even memes. And we learned the B-350, while perfect for nuclear monitoring, is actually a multi-role aircraft used for many things.
So quite a tangled web of claims and counterclaims. What's the main takeaway for you, for our listeners trying to make sense of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is just how challenging it is to verify information in real time, especially when tensions are high between nuclear-armed neighbors. You've got official statements, you've got OSINT, you've got pure online speculation, all painting different, sometimes contradictory pictures.
It really drives home the need to be critical of sources, look for independent verification, and understand the limits of any single piece of information.
Absolutely. And for those of you preparing for exams like the UPSC, this whole episode is a fantastic case study. It touches on defense, international relations, information warfare, the role of technology like satellites and flight tracking.
And how narratives get shaped. It shows how vital critical analysis is when dealing with complex security situations.
Which leads to maybe a final thought to ponder. What does this whole situation tell us about the power of narratives, especially ones that spread like wildfire online? How much can unverified claims or misinformation actually shape public perception, or maybe even influence diplomatic moves in really sensitive areas like nuclear security?
That's a heavy question. How much does the official story matter versus the story everyone's talking about online? Something to definitely think about.
Indeed.
Well, if you found this deep dive helpful for navigating the complexities here, especially if you're tracking current events for UPSC or just staying informed, do consider liking and subscribing. We try to break down these critical issues regularly.
And please share your thoughts or any further questions you have in the comments below. We always appreciate hearing from you and exploring these topics further.
And just a reminder, our main source for pulling together this discussion was the Eurasian Times. Thanks for tuning in.